Biggest violations of medical ethics ever perpetrated on U.S. citizens. This week, medical experts and others are meeting to make sure something like this never happens again. And leading that effort is Amy Gutmann. She heads the Presidential Commission for the Study of Bioethical Issues, and she is also the president of the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Gutmann, thanks for being with us. This is not a single incident. We've actually had many of these things happen. What is the purpose of your commission? Are we worried that these types of things are still happening today?
Allie, we can't know whether these things are happening today unless we have a fact-finding mission, and that's what President Obama has asked the Presidential Commission on Bioethics to do, to actually meet with experts and ask them, what is it today that would prevent these things from happening again? They've happened too many times in our history, and we want to make sure, and the president wants to make sure, that we can assure the American public that if they are part of a scientific experiment or a medical experiment, they will be treated with respect and fairly. So we don't know right now how the United States is relative to the rest of the world, and that's why the president has asked me to convene an international task force of experts. And those experts are going to sit down with me, and we're going to actually discuss how different countries and the United States fare in this regard. And we should come up with a report by year's end that can inform the public as well as the president of where we stand.
Okay, we know you're having more hearings in May. We'll follow this along with you. Very curious to see what happens. Dr. Amy Gutmann is the chair of the Presidential Commission for the Study of Bioethical Issues and the president of the University of Pennsylvania.
What I'd like to do is just very quickly go around and have the commission members just introduce themselves, and then I'm going to open it up to a few questions.
Yes.
Barbara, would you begin? Put your mic on.
Thanks. Barbara Atkinson from the University of Kansas Medical Center.
Nelson Michael from the Walter Army Institute of Research.
Christine Grady from the Department of Bioethics at the Clinical Center, NIH.
John Aris from a place you might know something about, University of Virginia.
Lonnie Ali.
Jim Wagner from Emory.
Raju Kuchalapati, Harvard Medical School.
Nita Farahani from Vanderbilt University.
Steve Hauser, UC San Francisco.
Anita Allen, University of Pennsylvania.
Alex Garza, Department of Homeland Security.
And Dan Solmesi, the University of Chicago.
Certainly the problem of incidental findings, though, is an enormous, obvious overlap with the genetic situation. MRI scans often give things you didn't expect, and often they're things you don't know what to do with. UBOs, as they're called, unidentified bright objects. Do you want to have one of those in your brain? Well, you might, and what are you going to do with that? Very difficult to say. And then getting again into forensics, lie detection. Certainly there are those who believe this will become a more accurate means of assessing when somebody is practicing deception, and then other available methods. Personality prediction or profiling, again, something that might be used in making decisions about who gets access to which particular kinds of jobs or in the military, or also could be used in courts of law. Neuromarketing, a little scary concept there, trying to assess when people are responding effectively to certain kinds of advertising or branding, or even who's got the brain that's going to be most susceptible to a particular kind of manipulation.
So given the context of today's meeting, I pulled up an old slide, not that old, about a decade ago, the cover of The Economist, the future of mind control. And I thought that the headline of the article was an especially nice one to start with. It started with a quote, in case you can't read it. It says, genetics may yet threaten privacy, kill autonomy, make society homogeneous, and gut the concept of human nature. In other words, destroy Western civilization. But neuroscience could do all of these things first. So, yes, for us.
And sell more copies of The Economist.
Exactly. That's right. This next slide will show when you actually look at it on the surface, when you blow up the brain, basically take the raisin and turn it back into the grape, there's our M right on the back of the brain. So the point of this is that we have a direct way to visualize what you're seeing. And of course, because we know that the visual cortex activates when we imagine visual scenes, we know it activates when we're dreaming, it raises the possibility that we can actually see what others are thinking or dreaming. Finally, just one final technology, optical imaging. Light does get through your head the same way you can see light, red light through my finger here. Hopefully you don't see too much when I do this, but it's getting through, and we can use that as another way to image the brain. Where I think that's extremely important is in these little guys, subjects that won't sit still through MR scans, but will happily sit on mom's lap and play some games. So we will be able to do developmental neurobiology in a way we haven't before with these tools. And this was the issue of potentially remote sensing. We're not there yet with infrared technology, but conceivably could be.
By looking at the brain, we can read, we can understand states, mental states as well as mental traits, not just long-term personality, intelligence, whatever, but also current mood, intention, am I lying, do I want to buy this thing? That all comes from brain imaging. It's in principle available, and in practice available as well. And I am going to just say lie detection here now. It is it's, in my opinion, its validity has not been demonstrated. It has many potential uses, including national security, law, personnel screening, and so forth. There have been 2 attempts to use it in court. I was at the Daubert hearing in Memphis. It was much closer than I ever would have dreamed.
Issues will follow. Controversies will revolve around, the big controversies will revolve around abortion, will revolve around eugenics, and will revolve around disability rights and disabled communities. There will be hard questions about what kinds of tests one should allow. What do we do about people's consent? If we're really interested in getting all this sequence data and health data, electronic medical record data, useful, incredibly useful potential resource, do we have to ask everybody about each study we do? Do we have to ask them whether they want to be researched on at all? Do we say this is part of your duty as a good citizen, as a beneficiary of the healthcare system, to participate in this controlled work? What we are doing now, I think, is in some ways the worst of all worlds. We are using data broadly. When people don't understand that it is being used broadly, they give it for what they think is a narrow purpose, with a little bit of language tucked in at page 17 of the consent form saying, and may be shared for other research or other medical purposes. And so people who participate in a Parkinson's disease and genetics study in Rhode Island find out, or they haven't found out yet, that their genotypes and phenotypes are in dbGaP, an NIH database which is accessible to researchers all over the world for research on anything they want to be researched on.
So we have the Human Genome Project. There's also the Human Brainome Project, and attempts to try to do as much neuroimaging as possible to try to see the commonalities across different individuals and also differences, and do a lot of the same types of population statistics that we've done on the genome side with the brainome side. Obviously, there's different information that the 2 fields can yield, but I wonder if you could speak to some of the ethical issues that you raised to see if you think that there are meaningful differences for data collection from neuroimaging than genetic collection.
I think there are differences. I'm not sure I think they are meaningful. I think everything I said with respect to, almost everything I said with respect to the questions of genetic data could be applied to neuroscientifically acquired data. also applies to old-fashioned health data, that these questions of incidental findings, of consent, of privacy, and of re-identification. I also think, though, getting back to the issue of forensic writ broad as encompassing not just courtroom use, and not even necessarily criminal or legal system use, but non-medical uses of both genetic technologies and neuroscience technologies. I think there are similarities between some of the marketing issues, whether it's done based on someone's genome or based on somebody's MRI scan.
Bartha Knoppers was referenced earlier. She's been one of the people writing about this. Other countries are ahead of this, of us on this, and some beginning to recognize an actual right. I'm going past researcher duty to participant right to get this data back.
Points. One is just how incredibly fascinating and complicated the results of the new sciences of human behavior are, A, and B, how important it is to continue asking what those results do and do not mean for fundamental ideas like freedom and equality.
Neuroimaging and genetic information doesn't necessarily introduce new wrinkles, except in between those things we might have things like the manner in which the information is collected, whether it's explicit or if it's covert, or the manner in which it's stored. So I know that Hank might speak to some of the re-identification issues that are currently happening and ways to make sure that the data is strongly protected, or consent to the use of the information and the extent to which people can consent in advance to the broad uses. So I wonder if there's something in between access and action that you might think would be an open ethical issue.
And the ability to influence or enhance brain function with these interventional techniques raises a host of deep philosophical questions that is beyond my charge today, and actually no one has really spoken about them, so I urge you to consider those. However, even the prospect of providing information about brain structure and function raises an interesting and challenging set of ethical questions. So like the Human Genome Project, neuroimaging makes available information about the present and future dispositions of persons, information that was unavailable prior to the development of these techniques. I'd like to suggest that information about the state of the brain has the potential to be even more sensitive and more personal than genetic information. Our brains, quite simply, are more closely linked to who we are psychologically than are our genes. If our genomes can be understood to delineate a space of possibilities for the way our lives might go, our brains may perhaps map out a space much more closely tied to actuality. In fact, our brains might be who we are. Brains are the repositories of all our memories, the proximal causes of our behaviors, including our mental states. Thus, information about the brain could potentially provide information about a person's past, present, and future behaviors, dispositions, and mental states. So today I'll touch briefly on the issues of mental privacy, lie detection, prediction, the ethics of consciousness, freedom and responsibility, and public understanding of science. So to begin, let's consider mental privacy. Each of us is accustomed to his thoughts being accessible only to himself. And with neuroimaging, however, the privacy of our innermost thoughts is at least potentially threatened. The risk is far from immediate, but the recent advances made by novel techniques in discerning mental content from brain scans are impressive. So, for example, imagine legal situations where self-incrimination is a possibility. Are there instances in which brain scans could be compelled or should be prohibited? With respect to the law, should scans that reveal the content of mental states be treated more like physical evidence or like testimony? A number of interesting and potentially important questions bear upon how evidence from neuroimaging squares with, for example, Fifth Amendment rights. More immediately, there are already substantial efforts to use neuroimaging for lie or truth detection in ways that don't require the identification of mental content. So various methods have been devised in general by measuring correlates of familiarity or arousal. Although some reports have claimed accuracies of up to 90%, when care is taken to look at the rates of false positive and negatives and to take into account base rates, such tests are clearly far from reliable enough to use in the courts. Furthermore, careful consideration of the research reveals serious shortcomings in the experiments by which these technologies are developed and tested. And so far, I think these fail to establish external and ecological validity. But despite these caveats, there's clear and continuing incentive to develop neuroimaging techniques to distinguish truth from lies for the use in the courtroom, or perhaps more worryingly, for use in interrogation. Mounting pressures to detect terrorist plots suggest that we'll continue to see efforts to improve such techniques and to apply them. Serious thought should be given to the conditions under which it could be ethical to use such techniques. I fear that setting too low a bar may set us on a slippery slope where brain data will be taken to be more admissible than they should be and far more dispositive than they in fact are. There are indications that neuroimaging may be useful in predicting future aggression, criminal recidivism, or mental illness. And when I say predict here, I mean that in a probabilistic sense. How should such probabilistic information be understood, and how and under what circumstances is it morally permissible or even obligatory to use it? What levels of probability warrant action or treatment? More fundamentally, there are difficulties in realistically assessing the predictive power of our techniques. Recall that neuroimaging shows correlations and not causation. Suppose, for example, that we find that certain patterns of brain activity are correlated with the disposition to behave violently. Adequate assessment of the predictive power of our data requires knowledge of the prevalence of these activity patterns and behaviors in the general population.
My question goes back to Dr. Rosen from session 2 this morning. He mentioned that we are still a few years away from covert brain imaging. But in 2009, early 2009, CNN reported that they were using remote neuromonitoring in the war on terror. Perhaps you can explain the difference, and is it possible that the Defense Department has moved past the medical community for neuroimaging capabilities? Thank you.
What I believe is that law enforcement and the military have weapons that
that's
can
not Hank. Okay, I'm sorry.
remotely influence people. If you were going to make guidelines that a brain image is what's going to determine whether they're guilty or innocent, they can be attacked even remotely. There are weapons. One is called Medusa. It's a microwave attack. It gives a microwave auditory effect. They could hear threats, violence. If you read their brain, they would appear to be delusional. They might become antisocial. But the truth would be they're under an influence. Just by taking a reading of their brain, I don't think is something that can actually determine their state. There's a cause for their state. Unless that's understood, I don't think this will work. I'd like to ask your opinion about it.
Ask you to identify yourself and
my
ask
name,
your
My
question.
name is Miriam Snyder. I believe that this commission was launched because of some of the horrific medical experiments that have been done. Is that why the president initiated this?
No, no, we were launched actually well before those revelations came, and we will talk about that charge by the president tomorrow.
Right, but we have a history. We have a problem. There are people being killed behind human experimentation that is unregulated, unsupervised, and above all, the research shows that injections are being used to induce many of these diseases under the study of neuroimaging. What's going to be done to stop this? Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Gerald Schatz, and I'm a lawyer and retired assistant professor of ethics and law at Michigan State University. There is law out there. The bioethics community has been oblivious to it, but there is international law. There is the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the United States ratified in 1992, and it makes informed consent an absolute requirement, no exceptions, not even in emergencies, subject to those normal legal fictions of consenting for the incapacitated patient to medical care and so forth. Additionally, the Geneva Conventions and additional protocols to the Geneva Conventions make research very, very difficult or prohibited altogether for those individuals who are caught up in war and armed conflicts. Thank you.
My name's Alan Hornblum. I'm a Philadelphia-based author who has written books on things running the gamut from organized crime to Soviet espionage. But for the purposes of this meeting, I've written 2 books on the history of using prison inmates as test subjects. You may be familiar with one or both of them. I'm working with a couple colleagues now on the history of using institutionalized children as test subjects for research, and I can assure you some of the material I'm finding is quite astounding, including the fact that Nobel Prize winners went to institutions for the feeble-minded to use them as test subjects. And in interviewing people over the years, not just test subjects, which I do on a regular basis, but also the doctors who initiated these experiments, these clinical trials, it's remarkable that almost all of them articulate how little medical ethics was taught in medical schools at the time. And I had to bring up, I had to educate one of them, in fact, about the Nuremberg Code. When I mentioned it, he wasn't even familiar with it. So I would encourage you to be as aggressive as possible, not just describe what happened, but really condemn those who broke the law, because there's doctors making decisions right now, and those decisions are going the wrong way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Screening, security, the intelligence community certainly has, I understand from researchers, supported some of this research. The whole horrible history of the polygraph is instructive here.
My name is Dr. John Hall. I'm a medical doctor from Texas. As I understand the memorandum from the President, it's for you to determine if current legislation is adequate in protecting individuals and if there's any ongoing experimentation. In reviewing the common rule, it's very obvious that there's a lot of loopholes to informed consent. All of the horrific experiments you've mentioned, Willowbrook, MKUltra, radiation experiments, mostly were done without informed consent. They were funded by the DoD and intelligence agencies, where I'm not even so sure you would know if there's an IRB, much less if an IRB is looking at informed consent. As a physician, relative to some of what you're hearing today, in the community, we are seeing an alarming rate of complaints of use of electromagnetic weapons, microwave auditory effects, silent sound spectrum, EEG cloning, which has taken the lab out of the laboratory and into the home. Most of these, from the research that we reviewed, can be done remotely. It seems to be more weapons research than medical research. I've personally corresponded with upwards of 1,500 victims, all complaining of identical complaints from every state in the nation of being exposed to electromagnetic radiation, non-ionizing radiation for the use of cognitive control or behavior control. I've submitted a paper to you, and there's another paper submitted to each member from another physician in Kansas City alluding to the same thing.
My name is James Walbert. To date, I have one of the strongest cases documented of these unethical violations against our society. Due to the facts of having the kinds of professionals that I have involved with this case, I have been able to prove that this crime against others and myself is real and shows reason to be concerned with. I am in hopes that I am able to prove the same thing to this committee. And by the introduction of the evidence that I have to introduce to the committee, I and the professionals that are standing with myself in this crime would like for this committee to consider the introduction of these documents with the growing concern of this crime to the President for his review. With these hopes in mind for this consideration, I would also like to ask of this committee to consider an investigation into these unethical violations of others and myself that are affected by this crime. With this consideration of this investigation request into these matters, I would also like to point out the abuses of children that have been documented by the many professionals that I am currently working with into these matters of this crime. To date, the professionals have been documenting these offenses against the children that are related to the many victims of these crimes. They have proven this concern to be valid, as I am pointing out to this committee, the growing concern of fellow states that have now passed laws against forced chipping of an RFID tracking chip. I was also wanting to ask if I could provide a portfolio of introduction of 12 professionals from political support to medical investigations, as well as private investigative support to the committee as well for review.
May, thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Lisa Becker. I am also from Wisconsin. I have been a non-consenting test subject in military medical research. I, too, believe my experience is referred to as no-touch torture, utilizing defense technologies. Jonathan Marino, he basically predicted all this a number of years ago in his book Undue Risk. I'm asking you to help initiate a congressional investigation. We've all come a long way. This is what is needed. We want to have the accounts of this extreme human rights abuse that's going on in our country documented and heard, all of the accounts. We also need what was done during the Clinton administration, which is a major declassification of some of these documents that are hiding what's been going on. I speak for many when I say we've suffered long enough. My personal experience has been 10 years. I've been vilified. I've been ostracized. I've been tortured. I have burns on my body. I'm an American. I have rights. The answer to the question, the big question today, could it happen today? The answer is yes, it is happening today. It is happening for some of us every day. I am begging for you to help us. Thank you.
My name is Jeremy Radlow. I'm here to tell you that non-consensual human experimentation is happening in the United States today. I've been the subject of this experimentation for more than 5 years. Calling these activities experimentation is truthful but possibly distracting. I think the criteria governing the selection of experimentees will prove to be a much bigger scandal than the experimentation itself. The psychological torture protocol that's part of the so-called experimentation includes, but is not limited to, the use of non-lethal weapons and mind-invasive technology. Sleep deprivation, pain center stimulation, and worse are used against subjects. While some experimentees have found foreign objects in their bodies suggesting implantation, most have not. Receiverless mind-invasive technology has been demonstrated under laboratory conditions, but the most likely explanation is that experimentees are implanted with foreign objects either too small to appear on commercially available scanning equipment or designed to be indistinguishable from the surrounding tissue. These activities are highly deceptive, use clandestine technology, and have the fingerprints of the CIA all over them. It's unreasonable to expect isolated individuals receiving this treatment to furnish proof. A thorough investigation is warranted. Thanks for your time.
My name is Catherine Nestor, and I'm from Pennsylvania. This commission has spoken of a long history of abuse of the human research subject. Although no one mentioned MKUltra today, President Clinton recently apologized for this. My young child and I have been used as non-consensual test subjects. We have been subjected to COINTELPRO-like stalking, remote neural monitoring, and electromagnetic torture, resulting in psychological and physical damage. And I won't go into the details of that because I have 4 pages written in here that is very similar to Connie's testimony. Please do not wait 70 years to investigate this. I ask Dr. Amy Gutman to begin today. There is new work for the Commission for Human Subject Protection on our shores. And please give us a dramatic response, Susan, and please give us a congressional hearing. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Peter Rosenholm. I'm from Rhode Island. It's non-consensual human experimentation. It's remote, it's covert. It's hard to prove it a lot of times. Many of my attacks were microwave weapons. Medusa is one. In all the hospital statements when I was hospitalized, I told of being hit by radiation weapons, that I could hear voices. Medusa now admits to all those capabilities. The other thing we deal with is like a COINTELPRO attack. Law enforcement attacks us, discredits us, will put us in a mental hospital if we try too hard. These people all don't want to go to doctors. The Patriot Act has provisions where doctors have to follow what they say. So a lot of these people aren't getting their teeth fixed, aren't going for medical care. We're in a bad situation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Connie Marshall. I'm a former mayoral candidate from Louisville, Kentucky. I have never been involved in any criminal activity. I found a document in my bank account that said, problem with Kentucky government, check federal government paperwork and file before releasing information to anyone. I am an 8-year victim survivor of assaults by directed energy weapons. The torture I've experienced consists of mind paralysis, being hypnotized or placed in a trance-type state, being tracked by a drone or satellite, controlled dreams, sleep deprivation, V2K, which is voice to skull, projected sound, extreme muscle spasms, and extreme muscle cramps. Low-frequency noises in my home, high-frequency noises in my home, sexual stimulation. I am watched in my home 24 hours a day and followed around everywhere I go, though I do not have a criminal history. When I ran for mayor of my town, I was also attacked at debates and forums. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Deborah Paulson from Kenosha, Wisconsin. I'm going to refer to a paper from Professor McCoy at the University of Wisconsin on no-touch torture. He talks about a total assault on all senses and sensibilities, auditory, visual, tactile, temporal, temperature, and survival, refined through years of practice. Sensory disorientation relies on a mix of sensory overload and sensory deprivation via banal procedures, isolation, then intense interrogation, heat and cold, light and dark, noise and silence, for a systematic attack on all human stimuli. I've been a human subject for experimentation for almost 2 years, and I've contacted Dr. Hall. I stand with a very large group. Excuse me, I'm very nervous, but I'm very tired of having my rights taken away, and thank you for hearing me.
Say, I've spoken to probably 3,000 people. He's on probably 1,500. He's on 5,000. There's a lot of us across the U.S. And there's certain statistics, I think, that if you find that there is something going on wrong, somewhere along the line somebody has to do an investigation. There's a certain percentage. You said you guys wanted to be in the know. We're giving you the information now so that you are in the know. There is something going on. And I think yesterday some of the colleagues went ahead and said that we didn't really talk about whether there's energy weapons or not, but I mean, we have thousands and thousands of documentations about energy weapons themselves, and all we're asking for is an investigation on this. People are being harmed, people are being tortured, and people are being killed, and I think it's a pretty important thing for a bioethic committee to look into, and all we ask today is to please do that. My friends are dead, tortured to death by electronic weapons. And I don't know how many more people will die. And I hope I will be here again if you have this next year.
I'm going to do the best that I can while being hurt by a national defense weapon that our country built. I love our country, but I am in contact and have been with the chief of the Department of Defense Fraud, Waste, and Abuse hotline. He's worked with me and my wife for 2 years, and he went to the Pentagon after we were air assaulted by a jet at 150 to 200 miles an hour, that being me and my wife. That's why my face is rebuilt, and she's at home taking care of 100 head of cattle with a brain tumor. I've had 3 removed. I guess my point would be this, is that I stood up to this program, and that would be the Joint Operations System that our country built with the non-lethal and less than lethal weapons system. And I'm the only one known in the world, besides the people that helped build this system, to have this actual pulse on camera and have caught it. And I would like to submit that disc. But I guess the one question I would have, it's okay, Eli, you don't have to beat me up for the microphone. The one question I would have is, first of all, I would like to submit this to you as promptly as possible, and then ask each and every one of you that 90% of the people that approached you spoke the same way I am, scared, but also spoke. They're speaking of directed energy weapons. That was phased out with the non-lethal and less than lethal programs, and we all know that. Most of you do anyways. Would you please help save my life? Ma'am?
My name is Letitia Peters. I'm from Trenton, New Jersey. I was a federal government employee
working 16 years as an electronics engineer right here in Washington, D.C., where I got sick due to toxic mold exposure. And when I started complaining about it and using my rights, I believe now, after 5 years of being out of the government, after 16 years of service, that I was put into this 24/7 execution chamber. And I, too, am looking for congressional investigations. I should be covered under the Whistle Protection Blowers Act. And I, too, would like to submit documentation, which I presented. And I have been denied medical treatment. I have been disregarded as being non-human. All my rights have been violated. And I just want to demonstrate some of the evidence that I have and provide to you, because I've been trying to get to the president, but I know all of my information has been rerouted. So I, too, am requesting a congressional investigation as well.
Hi, good evening. My name is Nigel Nicholson, and I have been in a psychological coercive mind control program. This started in 2002, where I was falsely arrested, I was drugged, and I believe I was hypnotized. I've been job mobbed. I've been put into what I call a assassination type program. Okay, I've been villainized. My friends has totally retreated from me, even though I've continuously reached out to them. Okay, I have been under what I believe is neuro monitoring. When I can think of something and go outside and somebody will walk by me and repeat what I just said, I know I'm not crazy. Okay, regardless of what is being said, they make the victims of these programs to be diagnosed with a psychological illness to hide these crimes, because we all know that to discredit an individual, if you give them a mental illness or diagnose them with a mental illness, no one is going to believe us. No one is going to believe you or I. And this is how they are hiding these crimes.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, my name's Tammy Battaglia. I've been enrolled in psychological experiments on the record since the age of 13 without my consent. I've spent many years recovering from experimental hypnosis, physical and biological testing that I've undergone during decades of tests conducted by government-funded doctors, corporate think tanks, and researchers. I've experienced tremendous loss and trauma over the years of subjection to non-consensual experimentation, which has been devastating to my life. There's no way to seek justice for what we've endured, because in America, the land of the free, justice is not free. The experiments violate every right imaginable and offer no restitution whatsoever. If myself or any other victim approaches law enforcement or government agencies, we're spurned and in some cases forcibly taken to mental institutions. I've not consented to be experimented on by any branch of the government, military, or members of the American Medical Association. I deserve to be vindicated and released from these experiments immediately, as do all of us. Thank you.
We provide citizens who are currently non-consensual victims of cognitive neuroscience and neurophysiological research and experimentation, which is enabled remotely through extreme low-frequency computer-to-brain entrainment technology. This technology exists and can be verified on subjects with a high degree of accuracy using current neural imaging technologies. Okay, this is an atrocity that has gone on for years, and like the Tuskegee experiments, it's clearly within the scope of this commission. Okay, we ask that the committee, just because of the existence of our organization, Freedom for Covert Harassment and Surveillance alone, we have thousands of people who have contacted us claiming to be victims of this. The justification for our existence is justification that you should investigate this occurrence further. Okay, we need tests to determine if a citizen has been harmed by a cognitive weapon. These are cognitive weapons that somehow these people are being experimented on with. And just overall, we need to ban the unethical use of science and technology on all citizens for any form, for any reason, and in any form. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Michael Shaneyfeld. I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. The question that I brought to the board is that In 2000, I was approached by an ex-Navy sub-diver, and he brought to my attention the use of an auditory weapon that he stole from the United States Navy. Yeah. He told me about this weapon that he stole from the Navy, and he told me how the weapon would affect the central nervous system of a human. And he wanted me to go out and assist him in certain things. And in 2006, my life changed. I woke up one night and I got a strong electrical shock in the center of my chest. Medically, I've been looked at and reviewed over and over and over again. My brother, he's a doctor. And I know exactly what's occurring is wrong, and I feel like I'm a test subject. And I've responded to the government, and the government responded back to me, but I have not seen no action. I've given y'all a report, and y'all can look at the letters that I've sent in.
Thank you very much. My name is Sina Rayan. I am an Iranian American, been living here since 1976. To answer the question to the chair lady that if it's still going to happen or is still going on, I will assure you that it's still experimentation going on, and one of live standing right here. I strongly believe that I have been targeted for the experimentation of a brain research since September 2008. Without my consent, they are controlling my mind and using electronic remote control device to send instruction. In the past 2.5 years, I have been subjected to constant electric shock, sleep disturbance, sleep deprivation. This inhuman and painful method of torture include reading my thoughts and memories. Through this, they have been able to control me and subject me to severe pain that I have been suffering for the past 29 months. My health has deteriorated during this time, and I have no medical insurance to seek medical help. My life is in danger, and I need your help from the government. I am only asking them to stop this painful torture and leave me alone so I can go back to my life. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michaeline Jones. I'm right here from D.C. I am the subject of MK Ultra, mind control. I am also the subject of electromagnetic radiation, and I have many videos to prove it. I've taken these videos to newspapers and to various places, even including, CDC, and everyone has just turned away as if this is hush-hush. I've had lawyers deny me assistance because they said this is too big. So in research, I found out that the former Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney asked for a reinvestigation under her resolution HR 1026 to reinvestigate COINTEL activities. I am constantly stalked. There's many covert activities that have followed me. I would like all of this medical abuse to be investigated, and if possible for you to get back with us. I didn't know about this meeting until yesterday, and I do appreciate your letting me have this time to speak. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Miriam Snyder. I'm an educator, minister, human rights advocate. I work with many people that have suffered the ramifications of unregulated, deadly human research experimentation. Since I've brought this to the public, I've become a victim too. Human research experimentation is being used to assassinate innocent people. I'd like to know the commission to address what penalties and protections are in place for researchers, and when are we going to start incarcerating researchers?
I just want to conclude by saying that the President's charge to us to assure him that current rules and international standards adequately guard the health and well-being of participants in scientific studies funded by the federal government demands that we consider basic ethical principles following careful deliberations and evidence gathering. With the discussion, we are well on our way. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you very much.
Can a microscopic tag be implanted in a person's body to track his every movement? There's actual discussion about that. You will rule on that, mark my words, before your tenure is over. Can brain scans be used to determine whether a person is inclined toward criminality or violent behavior? You will rule on that.